Welcome to the Behind the Shield podcast. As always, my name is James Gearing, and this week it is my absolute honor to welcome brain and body optimization specialists and the founders of the Bio-Optimization Institute, Jason Griffasi and Trip Harlan. Now, I personally got to experience several of these modalities along with my wife when we went down to their facility in St. Pete, and I have to say it was pretty incredible. So we discuss a host of topics, from their experiences as youth athletes, Trip's TBIs from football, his powerful sobriety story, the pursuit of brain health, true altitude training, vestibular training, optimizing elite athletes, neurodegenerative diseases, and so much more. Now, before we get to this incredible conversation, as I say every week, please just take a moment. Go to whichever app you listen to this on, subscribe to the show, leave feedback, and leave a rating. Every single 5-star rating truly does elevate this podcast, therefore making it easier for others to find. And this is a free library of over 1,200 episodes now. So all I ask in return is that you help share these incredible men and women's stories so I can get them to every single person on planet Earth who needs to hear them. So with that being said, I introduce to you Jason Griffasi and Trip Harlan. Enjoy. Well, Jason and Trip, I want to start by saying thank you so much for taking the time and coming on the Behind the Shield podcast today.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, it's our pleasure.
So I had the absolute honor of visiting you at your facility along with Sheila Thielen, and we'll get to that connection in a little while in St. Pete. Where are we finding you this afternoon?
St. Pete. I'm over in St. Pete at the location inside St. Pete Calisthenics. Trip is over in St. Pete as well, just at a different location.
Beautiful. Well, we'll get into where you are, why you're there at the moment. I'd love to get the backstory on both of you first, though. So, Trip, let's start with you. Tell me where you were born, and tell me a little bit about your family dynamic, what your parents did, how many siblings.
I was born in Fort Myers, Florida, and I have one other sibling, a younger brother, and my family dynamic was unique. My parents were about 21 years older than me, and so they were very involved with athletics, and in the middle of life, they were still young, where a lot of the other parents were starting to get into their, say 40s when they were still in their younger 30s. And so they were a big part of my athletic journey, who I am as a person. But also they're a lot like myself, and we're all a lot of like type A type people. So it's a unique family dynamic, especially as, we're going through the aging process, especially with myself being in health and wellness. It's a unique time where now I'm able to start to provide value into, their day-to-day lives by bringing in a lot of these new health modalities and ways of thinking.
What about profession? What were your parents doing?
My dad owned and still owns a hydraulic welding business, and it fabricates large hydraulic pumps that pump out millions of gallons of water in places like the Harvey Canal in New Orleans, in the Philippines. So it's been a unique thing to have in my life, is to have that family business. Before, my grandfather owned it, so it's been in our family longer than I've been alive. So to have that, around, and then to choose a different path was a unique dynamic. And so my mom, she was a stay-at-home mom. She worked as a PE teacher and then eventually became a nurse. So it's unique to hear the perspective from her experience in the hospital and the medical system and start to compare that to a lot of the stuff we're learning now.
With your father's profession, was there any correlation or did did the Hurricane Katrina disaster cross-pollinate in the world that he was working in as far as removing water and keeping areas safe?
Well, even since the early 2000s, when a lot of the larger hurricanes hit, his business had a big impact on everything going on. So, a lot of times hurricanes are a tough thing for people, but it's the busiest time of the year for him to get into these locations, to be able to get the team, the machinery in there, and to start to clear out that land, before it starts to do too much damage.
What about from your mom's perspective? Being a PE teacher and then a nurse, you get to see the potential of forging health in our young people, and then the downstream effect of good or poor health, in the nursing area. What, if any, have been your conversations about the importance of physical education in our children, and then that factoring into the rest of adulthood?
Well, it all starts with prevention. It's just that's the time when we need to be leading and teaching these kids correctly. Obviously, we're finding flaws in the education system, and it's not only just in what we're learning in the books, but it's also how we're exercising, what we're eating in the cafeteria. So, just to be able to have that behind the scenes kind of view and perspective from my mom was a big part of, I guess, now, like thinking about it, what shaped me to who I am today.
What about sports and exercise? What were you playing and doing when you were in the school age?
My main sports growing up were soccer and baseball, and I really thrived at that. I was a little bit smaller. I was born a month early, so I was a little bit smaller than a lot of the guys my age. But I was faster and I worked harder, and it was something that I needed that drive if I wanted to succeed. And so eventually, as I got older into eighth grade and freshman year of high school, I got pretty much as big as I am right now, and it really helped. And then I was able to step up and start playing football, and that became my go-to sport. But it's all relevant to, kind of what we're talking about. All the football, soccer, and even martial arts. I did a lot of training behind that. We're causing a lot of micro concussions, daily just CTE issues, and that started racking up over the years. And especially as I got into my 20s, a lot of these sports were definitely, I could felt the wear and tear.
Now, at the school age, what were your career aspirations? What were you dreaming of becoming then?
That's funny, and this will be something unique to say, but they asked me that when I was a senior in high school, and the only a professional athlete was all I could think of. But besides for that, I had to list three things, and the three things I listed was DEA agent. I was a bodybuilder and a ice cream vendor salesman on the beach.
You could
So,
do all those things simultaneously. You could be undercover as a bodybuilding ice cream maker.
well, I mean, think about I'm kind of doing a lot of that now. With the DEA stuff, I had a background in high level security, so even day to day, I make sure myself, family, and friends are safe. The second part is the bodybuilder, and I do my best to take care of myself, and at times, being a plant based vegan, I was extremely muscular and felt that pride at being kind of a vegan, healthy bodybuilder that didn't need the extra uh, calories through meat. And then the third part about it is an ice cream salesman. Well, instead of that, I'm sharing and selling wellness equipment, and I'm educating. So it's kind of it's not exactly, but it's also cool because I've chosen exactly what I wanted to do in my life. Like everything up to this point, I created my reality. And that's a big saying, I share with others is create your reality. And that's something nowadays with the post COVID, and we're not needing to work that 9 to 5. It's a great time where we can find our passions, create an LLC, and be able to move forward and work with whoever we want. Find those people like Jason, people like his wife Jessie, and surround myself around those people and create my reality.
Beautiful. Well, I want to go to some things that you talked about, but let's bring Jason up to speed first. So, Jason, tell me where you were born and tell me a little bit about your family dynamic, what your parents did, how many siblings.
Okay. So I was born in sunny Buffalo, New York, and spent a good amount of my life there until college. Let's see. So my dad owned a concrete flatwork company, 100% Italian guy pouring concrete shoes. Go figure. And then my mom is and still is a teacher. She's always done elementary education. And so my dad being an entrepreneur his whole life, and his brothers and family. And then on my mom's side, a lot of her siblings, she had 5, are entrepreneurs as well. And so entrepreneurship was always kind of something in my foundation and upbringing. But of course, I had to learn to pour concrete floors and go through that experience so that I could feel what it would feel like to do manual labor. And if I don't graduate college and all of that good stuff, this is what I get to do. So I was very fortunate. My parents were very supportive and caring, even though I joke about my dad being Italian and he was the typical Italian contractor. But at the same time, they've always been very supportive. You know, my mom being a elementary school teacher, she works with kids all day and just nothing but love. Everyone says that their mom's the best and nicest mom in the world, but I think I take that one. Yeah. Yeah, so I have a sister. She's adopted from Korea. She's 4 years younger than me. And amazing human.
Beautiful. With your mom, have you had any conversations about the evolution or devolution of education at that elementary level?
So she's always worked in Catholic schools, and so more of the private sector, and they tend to be, I think, I don't want to say she got lucky, but I don't think it's the same situations that you deal with public schools, right? In fact, the parents are always there, always interacting. She's getting the messages on the evenings and weekends. But the biggest thing was she got paid garbage for her whole life. Like, it's crazy. And that's something we do talk about. It's crazy that, you're influencing this youth and they spend more time with the teacher than with their parents half the time, especially with all these working parents, and their pay is still minimal. So that would be the biggest one.
That's so wrong. I mean, the priorities are just so shifted, and if you look at some of the top education systems in the world, like Finland, the teachers are required to have a higher level of education because, as you said, it's a very important thing that they're doing. But I'm pretty sure they're well paid for it as well. And it's lunacy that you can get equally paid in the restaurant industry, for example, as someone who's literally taking care of your kids 5 days a week.
Yeah. No, and it's the same thing for the medical system too, right? When we get into nurses, my wife's been a nurse. And it's the same thing. So it's like you said, priorities are a little interesting. I know Trip agrees. We don't think that's a coincidence. That's not by accident as well. So, but that's a whole nother podcast.
Yeah, well, I'm sure we'll unpack that in a minute. What about sports and exercise? What were you doing in school age?
Soccer and hockey. I mean, I was brought up on baseball, and so that's what I was playing first growing up, but I fell in love with hockey in high school, and growing up during high school in the suburbs of Clarence, soccer was a big one. So that was basically my training and, building up stamina for hockey, but hockey was my real passion.
And what about career aspirations? What were you dreaming of becoming?
A stockbroker. My whole life, I really liked how money could make more money. And so I thought that, that was the smart way to go, and went to school, got a finance degree, and going through the process, I learned just how corrupt and crooked that industry is, right? With not caring what they're selling, more just make the sale, close the stock. And so it just really turned me off. I just couldn't continue even after getting my finance degree.
what I struggle to comprehend is when you make a lot of money, that's other people's money that you've got. People that worked as a nurse, as a teacher, pouring concrete, whatever it was for, 40, 50, 60 hours a week, grinding, trying to make ends meet. And now you're able to finagle these finances to accumulate everyone else's basically work hours is what you've got. And I don't understand how we have devolved to think that that's something to aspire to, that the monopoly is this kind of holy grail of being an American, for example.
Right. And it's interesting. I think, the world is opening up to that and understanding it more. But to your point, it's always been a grind. And if you're not doing 17 things and, 12 of them are to make money, right? Then you're lazy and you're not doing it.
Yeah. And then you get all those YouTube motivational videos that you got to get up earlier and run and have a nice bath and then go steal people's money.
Right. Yeah. No, that's exactly it.
All right. We'll trip back to you. So you're dreaming of slinging dairy products on a beach while lifting weights and looking for bad guys. Talk to me about where that led you professionally.
Well, after college, I was trying to find my way, and an exciting thing that I did, I got my pilot's license, and that was a really cool time in my life going through that training. But that was also the big awareness that my brain wasn't working correctly, especially when you're getting your visual, pilot's license. A lot of multitasking, looking around, like you're not fixated on the instruments. You got to look around all the time. And when I would get done, I was worn out. And it was something I knew that I needed to get back on a more cognitive level before I was able to do that safely. And that was obviously because of the concussions. And through that process, a lot of that agitation, CTE issues were kicking in, and I was self-medicating with alcohol. Obviously, alcohol is something used as a celebration tool, when I was playing sports or hanging out with the friends or on the weekend, but then it started turning into isolation drinking, and it progressed into something that was daily, and then I knew there was an issue. And it was like that awareness was probably the greatest thing that put me into the position I am right now. I understood I didn't want to feel like that. I knew I was destined for a better life, and that was something that led me down the path to find and do everything that I'm doing right now. Obviously, going through the process of alcoholism, I got the opportunity to go to a handful of rehabs, which were like life vacation, like resets. It's almost like summer camp. You got to go there, work on yourself, physical, mental, and I learned a lot about how recovery programs could work, the good, the bad, and I evaluated that and I saw where they were excelling, but then also where the issues were. And I always said to myself, if I had my own program, I would do it better. I would do it like this. And that's where it started to lead me into that direction of how could I heal myself, but then also how can I duplicate this and share this with others, always in the back of my mind. So it led me into yoga, which was all about community, nutrition, but then it was the first awareness of the breath and how important breathing is. And that was a really unique thing. I was changing my life, everything was good, but I still didn't feel like I had that real electricity, blood flow through my brain that was dulling me down. And it wasn't until I got into high altitude oxygen, which is one of our more advanced modalities that we work with, is that I was the first time I was able to get that blood flowing through my brain. I felt like my body was alive, charged. I didn't have that dullness, and you could see it in my eyes. And I almost immediately started speaking better. I was more cognitively aware of what was going on in my life. And from that point on is when things really, really progressed for me to be able to put a lot of this together put myself in the situation to be around experts and find the people smarter than myself, learn from them, level up. And then it led me into finding people like Jason who had the same dream and same future. And it was just a beautiful combination of not only just like business knowledge, but then the ability to create this and make this a tangible business to help others.
You hit on a really important point, and I want to get your feedback on what you saw that was broken, because I've heard so many horror stories when it comes to more so like being put in front of the wrong counselor or psychologist, and that being detrimental. You have first responders, I hear it over and over again, and they pour their heart out to this person, and the person starts crying, and they say, "I can't help you," and it's you think about someone who's in crisis, and they hear that. That's basically verifying, yes, you are a piece of shit. You should probably just finish it now. Obviously, completely wrong, but that's what they're going to perceive in that moment. And then with recovery, I've got, I've heard many success stories too, but I've also heard a lot of people say that it's big business. The recovery centers are big business. So therefore, again, back to what Jason was saying, what is the focus? Is it actually making people better, or is it the bottom line? So what were you seeing firstly, as far as the things that were negative, that maybe even detrimental to the addicts out there?
Well, it was a business. It was a big business too. The insurance game was something that made these owners of these rehab centers multimillionaires. Um, the fact that they were looking for people who had great insurance and they wanted them to relapse and then come back in, go through the program again, charge their insurance. Not only that, but then the aftercare. It's If you had the right insurance, they would put you in. You would have a safe halfway house and integration process. But if you didn't, good luck. And, a lot of times if your insurance ran out in the middle of your treatment, they would just, and people were doing great, they would let them go. And it was just kind of on them. So that was really something that made me upset, just watching that through that process. And then also the aftercare, the way these halfway houses can manipulate a lot of these people trying to recover. Also, not only on the men's side of things too, but I also watched how they treated a lot of the women. They don't have money, they don't have resources, they don't have anywhere to go, and so they put them to work. And sometimes it's things to help, maybe make some phone calls or answer the phones to bring people into the rehab center, or it could be some more evil stuff where they're using their bodies, or helping a lot of these people relapse. So there's a lot to it, and that's something that we and it's just like something I've always wanted to offer, the better version. And now that the system is getting called out, and we're understanding that these options of what have kept us into, these dark places for a long time. Like, I wanted to recover, but it was just the system was tough. I had to change my surroundings. And so now it's just like I see a better version. I'm really excited to share that with others.
And just to add to that real quick, Trip, you would always say, I mean, the food in there is garbage, right?
Yeah.
The overall games that they did, there was no up leveling. It was pretty.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No. I mean, and you're exactly right. Some places had great food, and if you had the insurance, and other places it was just a place to get you off the streets for a little bit and a transition. So it was rehabs, jails, and morgues, and a nice number here that makes me feel good as a human being, showing that I had that discipline and I put the work in. I think only 7%, maybe. No, it's 3%. 3% of people that go through the door of rehab centers actually recover long term, and it's probably even less than that. So it's something that, even though people are wanting to change their lives, how many millions of people go through their entire lives fighting something, and they never win, they never get it, and they're just, that's their life. I'm very blessed to have beaten that, the mental, spiritual part of things, and to have that obsession gone. And it's been 7.5 years since I've drank, and that's probably the most probably the thing that I'm proud of about myself. Athletic accomplishments, business doesn't compare to just having that discipline to kick that after all the failure.
Well, it's just symptomatic of what we're seeing a lot at the moment. For example, I've said this many times. I never stand on an ivory tower and say, well, I'm in shape, so why don't other people just make good decisions and they can be in shape too? I grew up on a farm in England where, we grew our own food. There was orchards, with fruit. We had our own meat and chickens and, all the things. So my baseline was hard work, discomfort, and food in its natural form. So now you compare that to someone who's been raised in an urban setting, and maybe the bodegas where they get their food from, and TV at night or video games more recently. It's a completely different environment. My environment set me up to really have a healthy life ultimately. Someone else's environment, as we see some of these young kids that are already morbidly obese and diabetic at 14 years old, or the spine is already curved like an 80-year-old, they're not exactly set up for success. So pulling these issues out of the shadows and front and center and just asking, is this system set up to make us healthier or recover, or is it set up for the opposite? And I would say that our current, society is set up for disease, of which we were alluding to earlier, companies make trillions of dollars from. Where's the draw to make people healthier when these companies are making so much money? Whether it is a fast food company or a drug company or a rehab facility.
And just to add to that, right, it's not an area, and with everyone that we work with, we're coaches and consultants, and we point people in the right direction. But there are things like NAD, for example, for addiction that people don't realize is an option. And that's something like I'll have to confirm, but I think it's something like 10% actually relapse, right, compared to before. And so these are simple things, and they're not cheap, but at the same time, relatively speaking, when it comes to what you're paying, I think Trip, some of your places were 20 grand for 30 days, right? Oh, yeah. So picture that, and there's at least 10 people in there. 200,000, right? So like if they took that and got these things at wholesale, there are just so many more solutions that, again, to Trip's point, they're just not even considering.
Yeah, you could go on a cruise for 30 days cheaper than that.
Right?
You'd probably be better off.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Jason, let's go to you, and then we'll pull both of you into what you're doing now. But you were laying concrete, then you got into the financial world. Kind of walk me through your steps to where you are today.
I always, growing up and being in sports, always had a focus on my physical abilities and being able to work out and, just throw up the most weight. And so it was always something that I took care of, or at least thought I was taking care of and was conscious of. So a big one in high school was I was the skinny kid, trying to put on weight, which I think is pretty common for a lot of us. And so I'd say when college hit and all of a sudden my metabolism changed, the food that I was eating, the garbage that I was eating caught up to me and just made me blow up. I was like 220 pounds and just looked like muscular, but it was all hidden under a whole bunch of inflammation. And so it made me really, realize from a personal standpoint, again, not getting into supporting anybody else, but just myself, realizing, okay, there's a difference with what you eat. It's not calories in, calories out. And so that was something that, then through college, you'd work out with your buddies and enjoy that, to be in shape and look good for, going out. And, but then, taking it a step further, as 2017 rolled around, I got a big rash that took over my whole body and just scared the crap out of me. I went down to Florida and came back and was itching my leg, thought it was just a bug bite, but it ended up turning into a rash that took over one leg, then another leg, then it was going up my stomach and my neck and on my lip. And it just really scared me and opened my eyes up to, anything can happen at any time if you're not taking care of yourself. It's not just this nutrition thing, because I was in great shape. I was working a construction job. If you looked at me physically, you'd think, okay, he's taking care of himself. But it was a stress thing. It was an emotional thing. I was going through some serious emotional situations personally. And like I said, working crazy hours in construction, and it just beat me up. And then there I was at certain points. I was thinking I had a flesh-eating bacteria that was taking over. My mind just goes to the worst case things. And so that was at that same time, I was diving deep with a good friend of mine into the gut microbiome for mental health, because of one, diet, and then two, the gut microbiome and bacteria that's in the gut can influence the brain, right? The brain-gut axis is a very well-researched space. And so, again, it always was this piece that I had loved doing. We started a company called Mindful, and we were just sharing with the world how the gut microbiome and what you eat can influence not just your body, but your brain. And so then fast forward to 2020, when everything shut down and people were working from home, and I started to get into business coaching and consulting from my business background. We had run a construction company. We actually started a conference for 7 years where we taught people how to start, run, and grow a polished concrete business. Started an online university, Concrete Polishing University. And so I had always, again, had that entrepreneurial background. So I took that and went into business coaching and consulting. And 95% of my clients were in the wellness space. So whether that ended up being a functional health coach, chiropractor, a boxing gym, lymphatic drainage, all the way to like Germanic new medicine. So, God just kept giving me these people that I was passionate about, and it was just this very symbiotic relationship. And so I'd always wanted to, again, just keep going deeper with that and share that, and had slowly started sharing more and more. And then met my wife, who is a RN, and she, of course, a huge passion for the medical space, started in the hospital and all of that Western medicine. And then, of course, 2020 opened up her eyes as well. And we met, it was probably 3 years ago, and Trip was one of her clients for IVs. And I think that was maybe 3 years ago, Trip, something like that, 2 or 3. And so Trip and Jesse had met prior to me meeting Jesse, and Trip was always wanting to build his vision. And so when Jesse was finally time to leave her work and Jesse and I were together, she was like, there's this guy Trip that keeps reaching out and that wants to really work and build this vision that he has. And so he had Voltage Health back then and was building that brand, and it just fit, it fit so seamlessly, because we were all just very passionate about helping people, helping ourselves, right? We all come from these pain to purpose stories. And then I'll go further into another additional one that has kind of made me dive deeper into certain areas of the brain. But yeah, it was just always a passion for health and wellness, coaching and consulting. The finance degree, stockbrokers just weren't doing it. I ended up doing mortgages for a while because at least that was a big investment for somebody that I knew I could help and put my heart into them getting the right place. But there's always just been this deep passion for my body, and then understanding other people and how their body works so that they could really optimize their life. My business coaching and consulting had transformed during that time, prior to Trip and even meeting Jesse. It was build your business around a balanced life. And again, my rash, I know, came from my immune system being shut down from overworking. It's that hustle culture, right? It was like, well, do 10 things and you should be having your main job and your side hustle. And then when 9 o'clock comes, and this is what I, saw my parents doing. They were both workers. Even though my mom was a teacher, she'd still stay up late working. It was that hustle culture. And so I knew there was something better. There was a better way for us to operate, to optimize. And that's, then I met Trip, and the rest is history.
Well, before we move forward with the Biooptimization Institute, I think it's really important for us in 2026 to continue having conversations about the pandemic, because in my eyes, a lot of things were done very poorly. And at the end, people were like, well, we just don't want to talk about it now. And that does such a disservice to the people that we lost. And it certainly doesn't help lower, the deaths and increase prevention when it comes to whatever the next virus is going to be. So when you reflect back on that period, what are some of the things that you wish that we had learned from and made changes?
I personally think that it was done strategically. It was probably the greatest awakening tool that could have been used to get people to look past the day to day, to stop following Hollywood, to understand about fake news, to realize that this isn't the best option that we could have. And through that process now, like years later, and we're finding out that we were correct in having doubt about the system, and after being gaslit and act like we were the ones who were the evil ones, to not inject ourselves with that, like we were spreading some sort of disease to people when we had our natural immunity, and we're the ones who didn't fall for that social experiment as well too. The fact that we have our pure blood is something, I say that I'm proud of not drinking alcohol for 7.5 years. Probably right up there, maybe even more, is the fact that I was intelligent enough to not fall for their programming. I didn't get vaccinated, and luckily, most of my friends and family around me that I trust didn't get it either. And when it all went down, I lived in a high rise in downtown St. Pete, and the divide that it caused in people in the building as we're going up and down the elevators to see the way, and like we were standing up for what we believed in, but still without facts. You know what I mean? It was our instinct. It was the fact that we had discernment that made us who we were. And now, after all these years, that we're finding out that we were right. Like, I don't think there should be any tiptoeing around, to be honest with you. And when you brought this up, it actually got me excited, and my heart started beating a little bit. Because a lot of times we go into these conversations and we're like, well, it's like, I don't know what your side of things are. It's like, sorry. It's like, you got to understand that there's a huge issue, and people make mistakes. I'm being very firm with the way I say, how this science fair project or even social experiment went down. But also, it's like there were millions and billions of dollars of programming to get you to do that. People were forced out of their jobs. People were, lost family members and friends. So now, all these years later, this is not only that redemption time, but like, let's just get it right. Let's make sure it doesn't happen again.
First of all, if you don't learn from the past, you're bound to repeat it, right? So I think we're all just being naive if we don't want to discuss the situation. I also think there's, to Trip's point, there's a lot of purpose in that struggle. There was, and it's one of those things. Our parents tell us certain things when we're growing up, and they say, don't do that. Don't touch the fire, right? It's hot. It's going to burn you. Well, a lot of us have to actually touch the fire to realize that it's hot and it's going to burn you. And that felt like one of those situations where we kind of were all thrown in together and have to learn from the struggle. And that's where I see a blessing in it, and I don't know whether, there's a part of me that also thinks that there was good. I'm big believer in God and that kind of, there's a reason for everything. And I think there was a good side that was also almost allowing it to happen to kind of let us all wake up to it, right? Because look now what's going on. Now the discussions are around things like the vaccines. I mean, organic food, natural food, clean food, right? The toxins in the air. I mean, that there wasn't an awareness like that until there was such a issue. Even, you know, the overweight issues that go on that have gone on forever. It's still something that would still keep going on to this day, wouldn't even be addressed if COVID didn't happen. So, you know, to ignore it and just let it go, we're doing a disservice to ourselves. But I think there was a big blessing in it happening. It woke us all up.
What was interesting for me, because I find myself standing in the middle usually. You know, that's kind of, I don't know. I find that's where most of the normal people are. And when that first happened, it was like World War I. You know, there was two trenches, and if you weren't in one of the two trenches, then both of them were shooting you, basically. But when you stand in the middle, whether someone believed wholeheartedly that the vaccine was a solution, or whether it was a Chinese conspiracy, you know, whatever the two extremes were, there was one truth. The healthier the human being, the higher there is a chance of a good outcome. Period. Point blank. Yes, there were some anomalies who seemingly from the outside seemed like very fit people, but there was, you know, an abnormality. There was something inside that made them susceptible to that virus. So the only truth that I found during that whole time was that if you can make people healthier, you are going to improve the outcome. If you believe in a vaccine, then your immune response to the vaccine is going to be stronger. If you don't believe in the vaccine, your immune response to the virus unprotected is going to be stronger. But none of that happened. God forbid that you suggest that comorbidities were contributing to the deaths. You were a heretic. And so this is what disgusts me, is I don't feel like we really have had a wellness conversation after. You know, this is from both sides of the aisle. Both are complicit on this, because the obesity crisis is like 30 years deep now, 3 decades. You know, we should have had a complete control alt delete on supporting local farmers to grow clean food, putting PE programs back in schools, cooking food in schools, real food, you know, pedestrianizing downtowns, all the things that we know other cultures do and forge a lot of health in their nation. But going back to the money point of view, I don't feel like any lesson was learned. And the only thing that we've really heard as far as health is let's remove food dyes. Food dyes that other countries stopped using about 40 years ago when I was a child. So I feel like we've still got a lot of discussions to have on how do we actually halt this, because I feel like there was just a sweeping under the rug, whether you had the vaccine or not, and the actual most important things, which is basically the opposite of what everyone was told to do. So don't see friends and family. Well, we know community is a big part of health. Don't see the sun. Well, we know vitamin D is a big part of the immune system. Gut bacteria, as you alluded to, and mental health. Get fast food and alcohol delivered to your house, and then binge watch Tiger King, as I always say. So we need to completely, I think, level this whole conversation and start from scratch and put the real wellness initiatives in. But I haven't seen any of them post-COVID, to be honest.
Yeah, and you're totally right. And the business model of ours has definitely progressed, and from an actual physical training, delivery, recovery, into more of an education type thing, data collection. And part of that education is showing the before, during, and after, the results, everything from blood work to the, all around, bioenergetic readers, balance. So we're actually showing in real time. And sometimes, you can't just rely on old stats and statistics. Actions speak louder than words. So for us living that, bringing and surrounding ourselves around the people that can really explain it, who have been in the trenches right there and actually have data, and can be the whistleblowers, is a really unique thing for us. So it's like, and I think we want all the data and the truth to come out right now, like immediately. But it's like we can only process so much. It's like the awakening doesn't happen overnight. You just can't grab someone by the collar and shake it into them. It's got to be repetition, repetition, and sometimes it takes 10, 15, 20 times to watch an Instagram video that someone says it out loud to start or you feel it physically. Like this isn't just a perspective thing, because a lot of the stuff that we see was always just from our TV in the movies or on our phone. So now we lived the movie. It was pretty wild. Everyone had their own independent uh you know lives. Everyone was in their own unique cities and whatever, but it was a wild time that was like something to be remembered. So this is to tie all that up, it's a unique time to be alive, because even though we're not getting to these solutions immediately, at least they're being talked about. Because if you tried to talk about all this years ago and you're a natural wellness healer, you might have gotten blackballed, or even just the nicest way possible, maybe they just got rid of you.
Yeah, and I mean, you both bring up great points, and the thing that they do and they continue to do is just politicize everything. So no matter what, right?
Yeah.
No matter what you think, the first words that come out of your mouth instantly put you into one of the two categories, which is crazy to me, and I think a number of people agree. When you talk about it, I mean, first of all, it's right wing and left wing. It's wings of the same bird, right? Like they've got us so just kind of arguing on the situation, and that's kind of, to me, that's how they discredit everything. And then of course AI's here now, and so it's even harder to have these conversations. But it's great, James, that you're bringing it up. I'm interested. You don't think that they're diving deeper into it, with things like the food dyes, but then the food pyramid, and then the biggest thing is also these research papers. Like everybody writes a post and talks about research papers and says, oh, well, the research says this. And then you look into the research and see that it was funded by the manufacturers of that product and whatnot. So like they've just got so much deception, and then again, emotion with politicizing COVID and now health and wellness. I think that's where a lot of people just shut down because no one knows how to communicate. There's a big challenge in open conversation and saying, okay, here's my side. Now let me present, or let me listen to your side. It just goes right into, you're threatening my family or my life by telling me that I should or shouldn't have gotten the vaccine, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think what maddens me is if you look at the main principles of how we would make a massive dent into the physical and mental health of this nation, it's literally live as we did 100 years ago. Move like you did, eat like you did, have community like you did. So, and this is a problem going back to the corporate model, is people want to make money from these hacks and these shortcuts and these quick fix pills, and the reality is no, it takes time, and it takes just deconstructing, and then you can take a lot of these scientific innovations that we're going to get to and then level up, absolutely, but we've got to tear down the things that are destroying us first before we can then really forge performance. So but it would be such a short message. I'm actually working on a TV show at the moment from a book I wrote, and that's going to be infused in one of the elements of that, because if you could just present some of these basic principles to the masses and they went, well, I could do that today. That's exactly it. Like, it's not about, oh, how do we add to all the things to make you healthier? It's like, how do we remove most of these things to make you healthier?
No, I mean, we talk about, one of the core things that we talk with people about is detoxing, right? So everybody's talking about what can you put in, but there are simple things like just sweating, doing the sauna and getting some binders and getting all the garbage out of you, right? So as you mentioned, removing is just as important, if not more important. If you look at there's a lot of those videos where people fill the glasses of water, and your glass of water can only take so much. If that glass is full and you're pouring a bunch of expensive supplements that are going to heal you, it doesn't matter. That stuff's just getting clogged up because you're full. So, we're big proponents and fully agree on the whole, less is more. And even when we get into our equipment and talk about that, right? I mean, these, for some, their life, it's the only option, but for others, they are streamlined options or ways to be more efficient with your time spent. But, you're talking about red light. Well, you're talking about the sun, right? I mean, when we get into the oxygen, you can do to certain levels, you can breathe and get different breath work going, right? So to your point, that we're in an interesting time too, where people kind of overcomplicate some things. You joked about the influencer that gets up and does his ice bath and his cold plunge and then has his chlorella drink mixed with, right? And, that's a great option. But I think, and again, we get into there's so much psychological to it too. Like, it's almost like, well, maybe if we could make it seem overwhelming, then people won't even worry about their health, because no way do I have time to do those 10 things and get all those supplements. You know what? I'm just going to deal with it, and it is what it is. Or even, the argument for a lot has always been like, well, I grew up drinking from the water hose. That should be fine. Well, it's not the same water hose anymore, right? I mean, it is the same water hose. It's literally the same exact one, only the metals and everything have built up in that hose now to where you're actually ingesting that. So it's a different world. But I love your point of, what can we remove and how can we make this simpler for people to be able to digest and move forward.
Absolutely. I know when I see the influencers getting up at 4:30, like, you know what the best life hack is? Get up at 8:30. You cannot out eat the amount of sleep that you need. So let's just stop that bullshit. All right. Well, then moving on to the studio then. So Trip, what were the modalities that you felt most important to put within the four walls?
Well, our process always starts off with a priming series, which is typically a product called Centropics Cloud, and a lot of people have heard of PEMF, pulse electromagnetic frequency or field therapy. This particular low frequency device is PEMA, molecular activation. And so for this first priming part, before we even get into the core of the protocol, we are getting into a place where we can start to downregulate the nervous system, start to charge the cells, get the blood moving. And it's a place where we can really get into getting the mindset, because a lot of people are coming in with a lot of stress in their lives and holding on to that, to be able to get a couple deep breaths, let go of the stress, the trauma, the tension on some exhales, and to start to downregulate the nervous system is one of the best things to get them out of that fight or flight process. So at the beginning part, we always prime the body with the PEMF. So a lot of times what will even magnify that is we'll add a heat, potentially through a photobiomodulation, to add that red light, that charge, and even to warm the body up, to start to, the whole process is preparing it for step 2, which is our oxygenation. And most people, when you think of oxygen therapy, you think of hyperbaric chambers, 90, 100% oxygen just being pressurized in a tube into the body. But it's actually the opposite. The body and cells can only absorb so much oxygen at a time. And especially when you're someone who's not healthy, your energy's not flowing, you're not getting the blood to your toes, your fingertips, to your brain as efficiently. So we need to create a demand to absorb more oxygen. And that's where the science and studies behind breathing high altitude oxygen, instead of 90%, 100%, 10%, somewhere between 8 and 14%, simulating high altitude uh, environments. And so when you're doing that, you're creating a fight or flight in the body. And when that's happening, you're increasing red blood cells. And a big part of it two is you're increasing oxygen demand in your tissue, and that's brain tissue as well. So you create that demand by doing specific breath work, breathing through a mask, high altitude oxygen. Then when we drop, after we drop you in the hypoxia, which is 92, 93% oxygen, your body starts to go through that fight or flight, screaming for oxygen, saying basically, if you give me oxygen right now, I'll absorb it much more than I would regularly. So when that time is right, then we contrast the oxygen to that hyperbaric recovery style, and it just assimilates and soaks into the body far more efficiently. And as I talked about earlier, that was where I had my aha moment, was when you're starting to flood the body with oxygen after depriving it, creating that demand for oxygen in your tissue, brain tissue as well. I literally felt that blood pumping through my brain in dull parts that haven't had that blood or oxygen in years and maybe ever, flooding through there. And it literally gave me that aha, blood through, through the pineal gland, your third eye. And ever since then, I just felt that awareness, that connection, even on a spiritual connection, feeling that higher power. So, and then the third part about the high altitude oxygen, you're getting it, not only are you healing the body, helping the brain tissue recover, but you're also getting to elite athletic performance. Through this process, we're stimulating EPO, or erythropoietin, and that is legal blood doping. That's what Lance Armstrong and a lot of the boys did in the Tour de France, synthetically and illegally, to help them maximize their athletic performance. We're doing that just by breathing high altitude oxygen for periods of time. So we are improving the blood. We are doing that by alkalining the blood. We are creating an oxygen demand for, in the tissue, brain tissue, but then athletic performance as well. So once we get all the blood flowing, we get the body primed through the oxygen, then we get into the activation stages. And depending on if you're an elite athlete or, say, a concussion patient, we are tailoring these experiences different and being able to adjust that. So a lot of the times, especially say we have a concussion patient, after we've primed the body, got the blood flowing with the oxygen, get everything in the brain, then we're taking it over to a device like vestibular training, where we're spinning the body, working with the cochlear part of the ear, the brain, helping rewire the senses. And we're getting into not only stuff from concussions, post-surgery anesthesia dullness, vertigo, but then even into serious brain injuries or issues like dementia, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's disease. So it's like, once you prime the body, get the blood flowing, literally get the voltage, and the energy in the body, then we're manipulating it with stuff like spinning. We also have the ability to add in micro impact vibration instead of your typical shake plate. We are adding very strategic, gentle, healing vibration into the body. A lot of the times you do the shake plates, someone like myself with brain injuries, way too aggressive. Not only on the brain, shaking that around, but then you got to think about what's going on inside your body, your bones. Even inside your bones that's where the liquid, your metabolic tissue is. So it's like, are you sending a healing frequency into your body? Talking like that Nikola Tesla energy frequency vibration, or are you sending something that's aggravating your soft tissue, bones, it's just your brain? And that's where we come into all this, is we have biohacked. We've gone through and we've hacked the system. We've tried this, that, in different orders, but now we're optimizing the flow of these protocols because we have that experience, the data, to show. And that's a big part of what we're doing, is when you bring all these white paper studied modalities together, that when you put them in the correct order and you do them with strategy, then they work not only quicker, but then it gets you in and out, because just like Jason said, there's only so much time in a day. If you overwhelm people, then they can't get it done. So to get that in a very efficient time frame, but then also deliver the most healing that you can in that session, tailored towards that client, is one of the best things that we can do. So I could probably keep going on and on. This would be a great time for Jason to fill in the gaps. But a lot of those are our core modalities and are not only have helped me, but in real time stuff like vestibular. Now that with concussions, that I'm starting to spin myself, and I'm not afraid of it anymore. Feeling that agitation, it's actually energizing. It's just changing my day to day.
Yes. And then the Trip, you nailed it with a few. And as Trip had mentioned, right, it can go further when it comes to the individual, what they're looking at, but also a core one before we go into those would be red light. And so getting into the different hertz of the red light. So you see right behind me, depending on if they're spinning in red light or vibrating in red light. I mean, there's growing numbers of studies on everything from skin to vision, and then of course brain. And so whether it's just putting it at a red light and just keeping it on, or getting into different frequencies like a 10 hertz or a 20 hertz or even 40 hertz, where they're talking about where it's knocking the plaque off of the brain. Again, as Trip had mentioned, it's specific to the individual, but those are the core modalities that would be included. And then with all of that, everything, we are very aware of the environment. So we have audio playing, depending on the individual, that is helping downregulate that nervous system at the beginning, and then also starting to help upregulate it in a controlled fashion when they're getting into more of an athletic type activity. Same thing with smells. We get into like essential oils, for example, lavender, something that's going to help them downregulate, not putting them into a sleep state. But again, with all of this, we're teaching the body to be calm in chaos. That's where a lot of this nervous system regulation can occur. And so we're very aware of that. And then there's also intention setting that set the tone in the beginning with the priming, where we're talking to the individual. The individual is literally talking to their body. And I know some people can listen to this and think it's woo-woo, but the science and studies are catching up, showing that connection, that mind-body connection, has profound impacts. I mean, even if you get into things like Germanic New Science or Dr. Sarno, where they talk about emotions are what can cause things like cancer. So there's a lot of impact. And as Tripp had mentioned, as soon as we get someone in, we want to get them to forget about the outside. That outside world is always, I mean, your phone's right there, your thoughts. As soon as you come in, you may be here physically, but you're thinking of, oh, what bills do I have to pay? Or man, right after this, I got to go get dinner, to make sure that everyone's got something to eat. And so we're very aware of the environment that we're bringing the individual or group into.
Well, you guys gave me the full gamut, and Sheila was there that day, so we did the vestibular training as well. Absolutely amazing. My wife was there too, so it's pretty cool watching her go through it. But doing the altitude training, and it's funny because if you think a few years ago, those masks came out and everyone called them altitude training masks, and all they were small straws that you were breathing through. Same exact as resistance training is what it was. But it really was interesting because it makes so much sense. And I felt that kind of panic response when you lower the oxygen concentration, because you're on the bike, so you're going through exertion as well. And you could feel your body just wanting to receive that high concentration oxygen again. So that makes so much sense to me, as does the aggressive, shake plate, versus the tuned vibrations and the IV light. So talk to me. I mean, all those, like you said, you talked about everything from, neurodegenerative, see, I've got CTE myself, neurodegenerative diseases all the way through to athletic performance. So talk to me about the kind of people that you are getting walking through the doors on the healing level as well as the elite performance level.
So, we do get a good number of the simple one is elite athletes looking to run a faster mile or do a quicker marathon, right? Everyone looks at oxygen. And so initially when they see that, they've heard some things. And so we get a good number of people that are looking to run faster. Then it's been growing in the aging population, with systems such as the vestibular, where you're not only getting into that cognition challenge of Alzheimer's or dementia, but balance is a huge piece. And especially being down here in Florida, we do have quite a large aging population, and falling over is a big issue. And so between the vestibular for the balance and for the brain, and then even the micro impact, getting into that for the bone health and being able to strengthen those bones. And so we do have a good range in that. We have a good amount of people that are coming to detox. Again, as Trip had mentioned, that oxygen going through the body is not just helping with the lungs and helping with the brain, but that's flushing out toxins as well. It's going deep into that tissue. There are clients we'll have to give binders to after they do that to make sure it can mop up any toxins that are kicked out. Or we have our lymphatic drainage suit, which also gets big into moving the toxins out. And we've had a growing number of kids coming in, whether it's mental health challenges that are going on, because Sheila's vestibular has been doing some amazing work with ADHD and autism, but then also, again, getting into the oxygen and being able to work with kids that are told that they're too wild, or they've got too much energy and they can't sit still and they can't focus. Well, a lot of that comes from whether it's concussion issues, as Trip had mentioned, growing up and playing sports and it not being addressed, but then also getting into gut issues and different bacteria. And believe it or not, they're even getting into vision and how that is causing kids to be able to operate properly, right? If their vision is impaired and the brain is not getting the proper signaling, then there's chances that there are going to be some type of mental challenges, or may seem like they're hyperactive. So we're getting the full range, and that's why people will ask us, what clients do you work with? And it really is that complete package. And then even at med spas that will be positioned at for skin and skin health, that's again a detox and lymphatic drainage situation. And so aesthetic wise, this protocol and this equipment has worked. We've worked with many in that space as well. So it really is a wide range. It's why we have created the protocol we have, and sometimes we pull pieces out depending on the individual, but it's all encompassing.
Which lymphatic suit do you have? It's not Flowpresso, is it?
It's not Flowpresso. Okay. We have a more economical version. Flowpresso is amazing, but yes, the price point, and I'm sure they have their reasons, but the price point is a little higher, so we don't have that one right now.
Okay, I had the founder of
You're
that.
Familiar with?
Yeah, she was on the show for a couple of years ago now. I got to try that too. This is the thing. I get to be a guinea pig from all these guests that I have on the show. But yeah, it was interesting too. I mean, my profession, especially the detox element, obviously is extremely important.
I mean, they don't talk about it enough, even again, kids, right? When if you've got toxins in your body, you've got metals, or you've got parasites that are telling the brain, messing with the signal of the brain, or the gut microbiome is telling the brain the wrong thing. It's as simple as detox, or not as simple as, but starting with the detox is a big piece. Same thing with athletic performance, right? You better believe that your signaling in your body is not operating optimally if you've never detoxed.
Absolutely. One more thing, when I was there and I got to meet your father and we were talking about NewCalm, a lot of people haven't heard of NewCalm. I would argue it's one of the technologies every single person needs to have on their phone. Talk to me about that technology through your eyes.
So what I love is I would use the NAP program is one of my go-to regular programs, because it's allowing me to get that rest and recovery that I don't always get, right? With, as you mentioned before, getting up at 8:30, there's a great life hack for you, because you're getting sleep. Your body is going through that whole lymphatic system detox process. So what I love about it is being able to go to a space, go into my car and just turn it on and take a nap. And it's bringing me through that process without anything else other than just putting headphones on. And then that same goes for a workout, right? And being able to get the body amped up and get the adrenaline going and being able, and it's all through sound. And so I love, just the concept of being able to listen to something and it alter your state. And it's very efficient, something you can carry with you anywhere. And yeah, I mean, I can't recommend it enough. It's one of those like number one tools that everyone should have.
100%. Well, I want to get to St. Pete Calisthenics. It's a really interesting gym that you're embedded in. But one last area, Trip, you talked about obviously your, concussions when you were younger, some of the journey that you've been through. What are you seeing now on the back end of, the creation of your own studio and these modalities that you've been talking about today?
Once again, I created my reality. I saw that I was having issues. I saw that I wasn't living life to the fullest. I knew I could be a better version of myself, and I took the action. And that's something every day is changing. And, it's a lot of struggles being an entrepreneur, a lot of stress. And, it could be far easier for me to go out and just work a real job, be a manager of whatever business out there. But I chose, and I believe I was chosen to do something better in my life and to not only, be the best version of myself, help my family and friends around me, but then monetize and duplicate this business to be able to help, to help, whoever needs it around the world. And a big part of, like we talked about, is the prevention. And it'd be great for, when I see younger children or people who are in their teenage years, to be able for them to not have to go through the issues that I did through my 20s, not to have to waste all those years, which I, looking back, they were a great life lesson, but in hindsight, man, what I would do to have those years back. And that's something that I can help share and give that awareness and education, so people don't have to go through and do this again. And this is the generational curse that's being broken.
While you mention that, this is something I talk about frequently. I think it's not a conversation that I hear. I think it's starting to now, but I always preface this with this story. When I first came to the States, after a couple of years, I started realizing that I kept hearing these Uncle Rico stories, like these, men that were now at either side of 30, very deconditioned, and they would tell me that they were destined to be in the NFL, the major leagues, whatever it was, had it not been for their ACL, their labrum, their insert injury here. And it was really strange to me. I was like, well, what the hell are they doing in these schools and colleges that are breaking children? And then you live here a little bit longer and you see the pedestal that high school and college sports are put on. And in these conversations then with these high level athletes and high level coaches, you start asking them, is the line blurred between forging performance through these youth athletes and actually acknowledging their wellness and their longevity? And I think in a lot of places it has been. And obviously when we're talking about head trauma in hockey and football and martial arts, which I did my whole life, that is an important conversation, because as you just said, I wish I could get those years back. Well, we get to get those years back for the next generation if we have the right conversations. Because, I mean, for example, I'm not saying everyone goes to flag football, but athletically, flag football is equally as good, if not better, than tackle football, if you actually look at the game itself. So what are ways that we can tweak these sports? A lot of the martial artists, they're not having these heavy sparring. I trained with shootbox for about a year, and I don't know, half my brain's probably still on the dojo floor as we speak. It was just Fight Club, I know it's not supposed to talk about it, but it was. So, now we're evolving and we're learning and we're protecting the next level of youth athletes. So with that kind of being said, what is your perspective on the performance of our young athletes versus the wellness and longevity, and that balance between the two?
I love football. Contact football is one of the greatest games, but it's too much. There'll be a lot of changes made, especially at a younger level. You can't be putting 14-year-old kids, 15-year-old kids in high school football against 18-year-old 200-pound men. I mean, I was returning kickoffs as a 15-year-old sophomore, and it was one of the most dangerous things I've ever done in my life. I look back and it's I'm proud that I did it, but it's like something needs to change. And honestly, as I realized I wasn't going to play at a high level of college football after the concussions in the industry, in the injuries, flag football was probably the best sport I've ever played. The way that I could go across the middle of the field on a slant or on a post and know that I just was safe and I wasn't going to get destroyed by the safety, or even just playing it on like a rugby level to add that extra bit of lateral, the trick plays was so much safer and better to play than in a whole game full of linemen, just way too much behind that. I mean, yeah, it's a warrior sport. It's as close as we get to having real life gladiators, but there needs to be some safety implements being put in, and even real time stuff that Jason and I are starting to see, where if you do get a concussion on the field, you can be tested right there on the sidelines to see where you're at. Should you go back in the game? Because a lot of times it's just, all right, let's hit him with the flashlight. It's just like ask him a couple simple questions. How many fingers am I holding up? And for the most part, it's like, let's get him back in the game. And now it's like, let's have that safety and have those different options. And even let's educate young athletes to show that like there is an only small percentage that are even going to go to college, a way smaller and almost impossible percentage that's going to make it to professional. Let's find something that you can still have, create your dreams, and they're not just going to crash because you didn't make it to the NBA.
Yeah. Jason, anything to add?
I'd rather finish up with Trips than put mine in, because I think I don't see football going away anytime soon, unfortunately, right? Hockey's not going away anytime soon. And so it's kind of one of those things where, yes, Trip, to your point, what I love would be to educate them on the bigger picture and get them there. A lot of us need to go through these challenges. The biggest thing is put pieces in place that can help you recover from those quicker, right? Like you see the vestibular right there. I mean, if they put that into a gym class and, we're doing that after all of these concussions that they had, or the oxygen right there, right? And they did that, at least figured out a way, it's 20 minutes. It's not a long time. So I think our my biggest thing, and this is why, thank you for having us on your podcast, James, and for continuing to spread these messages, because I think the biggest thing is, or not the biggest, but a big thing is what can we do to mitigate these challenges so that over time it's not as much of a challenge, and maybe they can get to the level of understanding, okay, hey, I'm not going to be a pro, so maybe I don't need to go as hard with this. But I think that's, again, where we get to these technologies and support that we have in this day and age, where there are ways we can really help mitigate this if people, just kind of pay attention and then open their minds to the possibilities of, well, what if we did this a little different? And, back to then the flag football, there's a great solution, right? You're still getting the football activity, but not getting that same pain. And I think that's the biggest thing, is we've evolved too much as humans to just let things keep going the way they are. How can we step into mitigating and then eventually eliminating? But yeah.
Well, I think the other thing that I saw was a steep drop off after this high level of performance in college or high school to inactivity. And therefore, as we just alluded to, 75% of the country is obese or overweight. So that's, there's your science right there. We don't need to look any further. Whereas you look at some other countries that don't forge such a high level in their education systems, it's more play. And, again, the natural athletes are going to find their way to professionals or the Olympics anyway. It's a path. Erin Jackson from Ocala, where I'm sitting, is now in the Winter Olympics, along with some of her teammates that are all vying for the speed skating. I think she got into it when she was 22, if I'm not mistaken. So there we go. Erin is a perfect example. But the rest of us just enjoy playing sports. But if you have this kind of specialization in this sport, you end up destroying the love of play, the love of games. And therefore now our adults don't want to do it anymore because they're broken, they're burned out mentally, versus a lot of other places around the world where they do play multiple sports. I mean, hockey is played all over the world, especially Scandinavia. And yet there's a very, very active population that plays all kinds of sports. So I think we can even play these, as you said, and use contact sensibly. But I think the Trip's point was amazing. This facade that all these young kids are one day going to be playing professionally is destroying our children rather than allowing them just to play and then letting the natural uber athletes surface naturally. All right. Well, with that being said, one more area, because I want to make sure we touch on this because it was really interesting. Your office is embedded in St. Pete Calisthenics. I've never seen a gym that looks like that before. So just quickly talk to me about that facility.
So St. Pete Calisthenics is in the warehouse district of downtown St. Petersburg, Florida. Our business model our business model is to up-level existing businesses, whether it's a med spa, a gym, a doctor's office, all the way to professional sports organizations. And we were very fortunate to partner with this location, St. Pete Calisthenics. Not only is the actual facility amazing, but the owners are great, Aaron and Tyler. So in this business, there's 7 different businesses, and everything from what we're doing with the recovery and the biooptimization to aerial, where people are working on a lot of the circus handstands type thing. We're even getting into cold plunge, sauna. But a big part of what St. Pete Calisthenics and the dream behind it was to create a very intelligent way to get people back to playing again. A lot of times there's a gap between the physical therapy and back into the real world, where people go to physical therapy after their injury or surgery, they're released, and then they're just going to the gym, and maybe they're not fully recovered or they haven't been educated how to do things correctly. So that's where we're bringing people into St. Pete Calisthenics to help them return the play, going over their limitations, their goals, step by step, give them a timeline. And by working with us, we are able to reduce that timeline to getting them back to reaching their goals, whether it's just something basic like being able to pick up their grandchildren and play with them, or are we going to set a goal to climb Mount Kilimanjaro. So with this return to play program, it's a really neurological intelligent base, where you're getting that mind body connection all the way down, especially like Jason mentioned earlier, to balance. And so that, especially as you get anywhere past 30 into the aging population, how can we tie in that intelligent training, be able to recover quicker, but then at a community at St. Pete Calisthenics, it doesn't feel like you're walking into a gym, like your typical crunch style gym. You're walking into a place where the lighting is great, the smells, you feel welcomed, it's a community. You're not having that CrossFit aggressiveness, the injuries potentially happening. It's a very strategic, guided program from start to finish. And I know when I go in there, especially in the evenings, I feel like it is exactly where I need to be. I get my training in after a long day of working. I get my cold plunge and sauna, and it's just a perfect place to have these day-to-day trainings, and then eventually events, webinars. Like a big part of what we're doing is community-based education. So there's probably not a better place in the Tampa Bay area to do that.
Anything to add, Jason?
No, he nailed it. The beauty of this place is they really get you in the mindset to play. You see the the jungle gyms, basically, right? When you came here, you saw the different bar systems. And so instantly it gets you in that mindset of playing and having fun and being a kid again. And I think that's the core to all of this. If we can get back to that, we could communicate with each other better. We could heal. We could just all move forward. So I think that's probably the core that we love about here is just they instantly put in that mindset, returning to play. And then it's also your body, right? So again, we talk about this technology that we have that can streamline things, but the cool thing about calisthenics, what you learn is how powerful your body is by doing these activities, just using your body, right? They have an assessment that's very cool, and it's something that's just watching your movement, right? And I know we all know this from the past or have seen this, but when they're able to use such little technology to do things, it creates this awareness, again, just to life, the bigger picture. And I think they really, as Trip nailed it, the community here just brings all that in.
I've said this on here many times. This, I think, is really the draw for CrossFit and for mud runs. It's not the movements, and no one loves thrusters. We just did it the other day, and we don't normally do it anymore. We used to be a CrossFit gym, and now we've changed programming, but it's not for that. But the handstands, the ropes, the pegboards, the jungle gyms, the muscle ups, and then you go into the mud run world, all the different things. You're being a child again. And it goes back to what I was saying with this drop off. If you're just playing a sport and you're getting it rammed down your throat, that, if you're not first, you're last. And, if participation trophy, if you get anything other than first, which I think is bullshit. Like, I'm pretty sure they give a trophy at the end of every marathon, for example. So you're telling me that none of those people are worth, rewarding? I think we have this discouraging conversation about exercise, and I think that we need to get back into play, whether playing a game of football. I do soccer every Sunday with a bunch of lads, or playing in a CrossFit gym or going doing a mud run or whatever it is, like just doing something because you enjoy doing it and then having that community and you feel part of something. Fast forward a year later, you'll be fitter and happier. That just happens by osmosis then.
You nailed it.
With that being said then, so Trip, for people listening, where can they find the I'm struggling with that word, the Bio-Optimization Institute online, and then where can they find each of you online as well?
On Instagram, the go-to is, what is it? Jason, you might be better off at this. You want to?
So to the website, you'd go to theboi.health. Right. And then you can find all of our socials from there. But yes, our Instagram, YouTube, LinkedIn, those will all either be the Bio-Optimization Institute or Bio-Optimization Institute if it was too long and we couldn't fit it in there. And then you can find Trip at Trip Harlan, right? I think that's your Instagram, right? Yep. And then I'm at Jason Griffasi on Instagram. And then from there, you can find all the others.
Brilliant. Well, I want to thank you. I want to thank Sheila first for making this connection. Give her a shout out.
Always thank you, Sheila.
Yeah, Sheila's a rock star.
Oh,
she
man.
Is.
Yeah.
Damn dynamo, that's for sure. And then I want to thank you for putting my wife and I through all the treatments and really getting to experience this firsthand and coming back again to do the vestibular the second time. And then most importantly, I want to thank you both for being so generous with your time and coming on the Behind the Shield podcast today.
Thank you, James.
Thank you. It was an honor.